All right, peace in our time. Why is this important? No, I'm not talking about the Gaza ceasefire. I'm actually talking about a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. As we all know, the war in Ukraine has been an absolute disaster. Many people are losing their lives, um, and this has been a huge waste in treasury, resources, and forever that region is going to be scarred with years, generational years of trauma. Now, Putin recently did a conference call in which he wants to do potential peace talks with Donald Trump, setting up lasting peace in Ukraine. To be clear here, Russia does occupy a good portion of Ukrainian territory. And if there is to be a ceasefire, what does that look like? Those regions occupied by Russia, will they become their own nation state? Will they remain under Russian rule? What's going to happen to Zelensky and his administration? Plus, will there be any kind of accountability in regards to the billions of dollars put into Ukraine, as well as the weapons? The key word here, those weapons, will there be any kind of accountability for them? These are the questions that we need to ask, especially as we are potentially walking into a real peace deal, potentially. And I say that because we all know how the military industrial complex likes to work things out. So let's go ahead and pull up this video here. Many of you have probably already seen it. It has gone viral, but this is Putin speaking. I will not interrupt it, but there are subtitles here for everyone to read along. So let's go along with it.
We're also open for dialogue with the new US administration on the Ukrainian conflict. The most important thing here is to eliminate the fundamental reason for the conflict. That's the most important. And as for settling the situation itself, its goal should be not a brief ceasefire, not just getting some time to regroup and rearm and carry on the conflict, but long-term peace based on respect to lawful interests of all people and nationalities living in the region. And of course, we're going to fight for the interests of Russia and its people. This is actually the goal and point of the special military operation. We're also
So I want to pull up this article here. And again, look, I don't want World War III to happen. I don't want to, walk outside, even though it's really cold, with my cup of coffee. Why would I be walking outside, even though it's -6 degrees outside here in Chicago, and see a big nuclear explosion, mushroom cloud in the sky, a wall of fire, and I'm vaporized. I don't want that to happen to anybody. I don't want World War III, the sequel we've all been dreading for, to come into reality. But if there can be a peace deal done, then thank goodness, and the madness will end. But the trauma will still remain. Trump, I still have a half a day to settle Ukraine conflict. New U.S. President Donald Trump said that he still had half a day to find a diplomatic solution to the Ukraine conflict after he was reminded about his earlier promise to end the fighting within 24 hours of his return to the White House. So he had to be reminded. Hey, Trump, yeah, what's up? Hey, so ending that war in Ukraine. Oh, dude, thank God you reminded me. I almost forgot about that. That's still going on? Yeah. I still got half a day. I'll figure it out. Give me 12 hours, man. I used to know guys like that in Chicago, okay? Be like, yeah, you just give me 12 hours. I'll have your money, Billy. I promise. Please don't break my legs. Continuing on. Midway through his inauguration day on Monday, journalists asked Trump whether he would be able to keep the promise that he repeatedly made during the campaign. Well, it's only half a day. I have another half a day left. We will see, he joked, sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office. That's not a time to joke, Trump. The U.S. president reiterated his willingness to meet with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, with a view to finding a diplomatic settlement to the crisis. We are going to try and get it done as quickly as possible. The war with Ukraine and Russia should have never started, which I agree with him on that. Trump added that he got along with Putin great during his first term. I would hope he wants to make a deal, he remarked. His pick for U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, little boy Rubio, said on Monday that he would not say when the hostilities between Moscow and Kiev would end, but said each side would have to something or concede something in order to resolve the conflict. Putin welcomed Trump's intention to resume dialogue between Russia and the U.S. as he congratulated the U.S. president on his inauguration. The Russian authorities have noted statements by the new U.S. leader and his associates about the desire to restore direct contacts with Russia, which were halted by the previous administration, and about the need to do everything to prevent World War III, Putin said. Moscow remains committed to its principles and believes that dialogue must be built upon equal and mutual respectful basis, he added. Isn't that fantastic? But, folks, there is some things to take away. I want to pull up this video here. Rachel Belvins, who's been on our show before, and I want to play it for all of you.
Now, we have yet to hear from Trump himself on what he actually plans to do regarding the war in Ukraine and tensions with Russia, which are clearly at an all-time high. But we did hear from Russian President Putin on Monday when he gave an address during a meeting of Russia's Security Council, and he actually sent Trump his congratulations on returning to the White House. And he also said he appreciates the fact that Trump has made it clear that he is open to dialogue.
И мы видим заявление вновь избранного президента США и членов его команды о желании восстановить прямые контакты с Россией, прерванные не по нашей вине уходящей администрации. Слышим также его заявление о необходимости сделать все, чтобы не допустить Третьей мировой войны. Безусловно, мы приветствуем такой настрой и поздравляем избранного президента Соединенных Штатов Америки со вступлением в должность.
Putin also noted that while Russia is open to talks on the war in Ukraine, they should be very clear about what the goals are here and about the fact that they are only going to be pushing for a lasting resolution. So in other words, they're not looking for a third version of the Minsk Accords where they make an agreement now in the short term and then the West turns around and uses the break in fighting to try to rebuild Kiev's military for a future war with Russia.
Мы также открыты для диалога с новой администрацией США по украинскому конфликту. Самое важное здесь – устранить первопричины кризиса, о которых мы много раз говорили. Это самое главное. Что же касается самого урегулирования ситуации, то вновь хочу подчеркнуть, его целью должно быть не краткое перемирие, а не какая-то передышка для перегруппировки сил и перевооружения с целью последующего продолжения конфликта, а долгосрочный мир на основе уважения законных интересов всех людей, всех народов, которые проживают в этом регионе.
And I think it's notable here that Putin is coming out and that he's saying this as clearly as he is, because every report that we've seen in the Western media where it's citing anonymous sources and they claim to be Trump insiders, they're all talking about a proposal of a frozen conflict.
Now, I do want to pull up this article here. This is, of course, and by the way, shout out to Rachel. Please be sure to follow her on our social media. She's done phenomenal work. But why Biden's Ukraine win was Zelensky's loss. When Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 3 years ago, my goodness, 3 years of horror, President Joe Biden was set 3 objectives for the U.S. response. Ukraine's victory was never among them. The phrase the White House used to describe its mission at the time, supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes, was intentionally vague. It also raised the question, as long as it takes to do what? We were deliberately not talking about territorial parameters, says Eric Green, who served on Biden's National Security Council at the time, overseeing Russia policy. The U.S., in other words, made no promise to help Ukraine recover all the land Russia had occupied, and certainly not the vast territories in eastern Ukraine and the Crimean Peninsula taken in its initial invasion in 2014. The reason was simple, Green says. In the White House view, doing so was beyond Ukraine's ability, even with robust help from the West. That was not going to be a success story ultimately. The more important objective was for Ukraine to survive as a sovereign, democratic country free to pursue integration with the West. That was one of the 3 objectives Biden said. He also wanted the U.S. and its allies to remain united, and he insisted on avoiding direct conflict between Russia and NATO. Looking back on his leadership during the war in Ukraine, certain to shape his legacy as a statesman, Biden has achieved those 3 objectives. But success on those limited terms provides little satisfaction, even with some of his closest allies and advisors. It's unfortunately the kind of success where you don't feel great about it, Green says in an interview with Time, because there's so much suffering for Ukraine and so much uncertainty about where it's ultimately going to land. which means all what this was wasting money and taking lives, human lives on both sides. All of this was a waste. Think about the families, the people, the cities, the towns destroyed. All because of what? Ego and pride, vanity, narcissism. And I guess, hey, got to fill up the quota for the military industrial complex. You know, we were warned about this from General Dwight D. Eisenhower. I wish more people listened. For the Ukrainians, disappointment with Biden has been building throughout the invasion, and they have expressed it ever more openly since the U.S. presidential elections ended in Donald Trump's victory. In a podcast that aired in early January, President Zelensky said the U.S. had not done enough under Biden to impose sanctions against Russia. Oh, yes, it has. And to provide Ukraine with weapons and security guarantees. You got a lot of money and you got a lot of weapons. Meanwhile, the people in North and South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, in Hawaii, in California, in Michigan, hell, all across the USA, anytime Americans are facing off against natural disasters, we get a one-time, $700? Whereas Ukraine got billions of dollars in aid, in resources. What about the people? What about us? Did we not get anything? Because, you know, looking back at it, I'm seeing billions of aids go overseas, but yet right here at home, you still have Americans suffering. You still have Americans suffering from the hurricanes that hit the East Coast. And hey, let's look at the people of LA County. Ask them how they're doing. Oh, that's right. They have no home, so they can't really pick up the phone and talk to you. The criticism was usually pointed and seems all the more remarkable given how much support the U.S. has given Ukraine since Biden's tenure. $66 billion in military assistance. Whoa, hold on. I didn't read that properly. $66 billion in military assistance alone since February 2022, the Russian invasion, according to the U.S. State Department. Combined with all of the aid Congress had approved for Ukraine's economic, humanitarian, and other needs, the total comes to around, drum roll please, $183 billion as of last September, according to Ukraine Oversight, a U.S. government watchdog created in 2023 to monitor and account for all of this assistance. Yet Zelensky and some of his allies insist that the U.S. had been too cautious in standing up to Russia, especially when it comes to granting Ukraine a clear path to NATO membership. It's very important that we share the same vision for Ukraine's security future in the EU and NATO, the Ukraine president said during his most recent visit to the White House in September. You know what this means, folks? There is no plan. So in other words, the future that Zelensky and many of his countrymen have in mind is one in which Russia is defeated. That's not going to happen. But in rallying the world to fight, the implication Biden embedded in his own goals was that defending Ukraine against Russia is not the same as defeating Russia. So it's not surprising that the goal remains far from Zelensky's reach. I just want to put this up here. There's a quote from Jimmy Dore, because this was Aaron Mate retweeting out this article. It may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal. So how else should we end this segment? Well, I always felt that comedy was a good route. And why not? Why not?
Hello, I am Svetlana from Kyiv, and I want to thank New York Times for exposing the ugly face of war, the devastating dating scene. In 2022, I was engaged to be married to Pavlo, but as you can see from this video, he willingly enlisted for Ukrainian military. And with so many men enlisting of their own free will, the pool of dateable men has become, how do you say, slim pickings. I was so desperate. I went on date with Ihor. Ihor is a nice man, but he has loose skin and old balls and fought in Waffen SS. So I started
Well, at least you gave him a chance.
online dating, and to my celebration, I matched with Dmitro, who was handsome and seemed to have good values. But when I met him in person, he looked nothing like his photo. His arms, legs, removed. He was amputee. A girl should not stoop so low. I visited massive military cemetery in Kharkiv this morning and couldn't help but think of the words of great Hillary Clinton.
Women and children are the primary victims of conflict.
Woe is me. I have run out of options and am reduced to scissor with Pavlo's sister Yana. Lucky for me, she has mustache like man.
Well, Hey, maybe there'll be a ceasefire. Maybe there'll be peace in our time. I am ever hopeful for some kind of peace, some kind of immediate solution. But folks, let's be clear here. The war in Ukraine will go down in history as a horrific disaster. Lives lost, forever scarred, treasury lost. I only can imagine what we could have done with that 183 billion if this war never happened, what it could have been used for the people here. But then I'm quickly reminded of, that's right, that money would have been used in another potential conflict somewhere overseas. We have money for war, but we can't take care of our people. I'm sure there's a lesson here. When are we going to speak out?